Want to learn how to gap fill your kits? Stay tuned. Not So Average Builder is brought to you by these great retailers. There'll be promo codes in the description below. The first method I'm going to show you is the Tamiya putty. Now I will show you two other methods in here and a third one at the end. But with the Tamiya putty, because it is a tube, whenever you first open this, it is under pressure. So don't do what I'm doing and wipe it on a napkin. That was the first thing I had available. But if you don't stop this stuff, it will continue to push out and you will leave your whole tube. So another important part is don't leave your tube open. Also, all I had were these Q-tips. Also not the best motive or idea for getting your stuff onto your kits, but that's okay. So what you're going to do is press it into the gaps. Now because this is a bigger gap, you may need to do multiple applications, but just know the more you put on, the longer it will take to dry. So what I'm doing here is I'm just pressing it in and getting as close to that vent as possible because I want to fill this gap off and make it look like the vent was actually supposed to be there and this little recessed area was not. And if you work the putty too much, it can kind of cause some issues. It can cause some flat spots. I do find some edge pieces that were kind of off, so I am putting some putty there and we'll sand this all out. But like I said, you will need to do, if it is a big gap like this, I think I did 2 layers on this and it's not a big deal. Let it dry for a couple hours, sand it, put another layer on, do it all over again. It's really, really simple to work with. Now, one thing I did learn, this stuff smells like the Tamiya extra thin, so I think it does have some of that in there to kind of lock it in place. So you don't want to move this too much once it starts to dry because it is melting into the plastic to lock itself in there. When I was putting the knee spikes on this, I used just the Tamiya putty and it caused some issues. I was able to get it fixed, but it's okay. Now here's the super glue method. This is just as simple. Again, I would probably use something to spread it out, but I didn't have any tools like that, so all I'm doing is putting a small dab on each of those little recesses. And I'm going to take the same, well, not the same Q-tip, but I'm going to take a Q-tip and kind of flatten it out. Because the less you have to sand, the better off you are, so if you can make it as smooth as possible, it works out. Now, this sanding process, I'm using 600 grit. I do use the 400 grit, but remember with 400 grit, you want to go slow. You don't want to put a lot of pressure, otherwise you're going to put gouges in the plastic that you can't get out, and you'll have to redo the putty or super glue method. So just go easy on it. A little bit of pressure will go a long way with this stuff. And once you get most of this big stuff knocked down, go back with your 600 grit and smooth it all out. It's very simple. The super glue is the same way. I only had to use a 600 grit on it. I don't think that I show that, but it's the same principle. Once it dries, hit it with the 600, smooth it out, and you'll be good to go. And as you can tell, it's a very smooth surface once you sand it down, and it dries hard to the touch, so you don't have to worry about anything. Once you put some primer over this, you'll never even know that it was here, and that's a beautiful part about this stuff. The super glue, same way. Now before it's painted, obviously there's a white line because once this stuff dries and you start sanding in it, it picks up a little bit of the sanding dust, so you will notice this one. But as soon as I put some primer on here, it'll have disappeared. One thing I did not mention, and I will go over this really quickly. This is not regular extra thin cement. This is what I call, or what I've heard, it's called sprue goo. So all you do, if you've got some extra sprues lying around that you want to get rid of, you basically take a leftover runner, use your old terrible nippers. You're gonna nip off, we'll just nip off this section right here, just for sake of the situation. Then what you're going to want to do, you want to just make some small pieces. Doesn't have to be exact. These are all going to be dissolved in the mister or in the extra thin cement anyways. Now, I'm not familiar with the Mr. Cement brand, but any one of the polystyrene welding cements, like the extra thin, and I'm pretty sure the Mr. Cement S, all of those, you have a leftover one, you can get a regular glass jar as well. You don't have to use a leftover bottle. I had spilled 90% of this one, so I decided to pour some of the new one in there and make this one my sprue goo. The cool part about sprue goo is that when you put it on, it's basically a plastic string. You just put this on here and it permanently affixes itself into place really quickly because it is melted styrene that still has a lot of the glue in there. The downside with it is you get all these little stringies. The other downside with this stuff is it takes an incredibly long time to dry because there is a lot of plastic in here and it kind of locks the cement in there, so it doesn't allow it to properly dissolve like it should and dry out. So that causes a problem. But the cool thing is, so you take these pieces, I thought I had a spare sheet of styrene lying around. I don't. But you take these pieces, and this flat piece, we'll use this as an example, and put that on there with the sprue goo. Once this stuff dries, it is permanently affixed because not only does it still melt the already melted plastic, it also melts and locks into the non-melted plastic. And what that does is it allows it to become a permanent fixture. So that's the sprue goo, the Tamiya putty, and your basic super glue are awesome arsenals that you can do. Now the Tamiya putty, not everybody has. Super glue, well, everybody can get a hold of that. You don't need the Instaset. It helps in situations, but you don't need it. And the sprue goo, I'm sure everybody's got a bottle of this that they're willing to sacrifice, and I know everybody who builds in this hobby has some leftover sprues that they have no clue what to do with. Now the cool thing is you can have color matched. So if you are not going to paint your kit, but you've got a giant nick and you don't want to have to worry about filling and priming and then painting, you can find the exact color sprue that this came off of, drop it in a small jar of this, of just the cement, let it melt, fill your gap, and when you sand it, it is the same color. So you never even knew it was there. So that is a cool trick that you guys can learn, you guys can use, and it will help you. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment down below. If you need to contact me directly, notsoaveragebuilder@gmail.com. I answer any questions I can. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. The #1 motto on this channel is don't just be an average builder, be a not so average one. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.